Again, if you can't use the table for this particular problem, then you'd go back here and you could use the quadratic equation to solve this. How else can we solve a quadratic?
Go against numbers.
We can solve by graphing. And we can graph right here because it's got a table for us. Okay. We can solve, I already said the quadratic equation. And then we can solve by factoring. So for some reason, you don't understand how to use a table, or you just disregard the table. I know that kooky things happen on test day where you're reading a problem and you say, oh, I didn't even see the table. And you start to look at this particular function there. You can solve your function down here using any method that you want. But the truth is, what are equations called? What are zeros of a function, of a quadratic function really called? What else are they called? X-intercepts. That's the most important thing to understand when you're dealing with graphing and a table. Because if we know they're x-intercepts, what do we know about them? Yeah, if it's an x-intercept, we know they have a y of 0. So if I'm looking for my quadratic, or my roots, or my solutions, or my zeros, if I use the table, where do you see a y of 0?
All the way second from the bottom. The y.
Where do you see a y of 0?
Second way down from the bottom.
Okay. Thank you. When x is 5, that would be a more mathematical answer. When x is 5, and when x is 1. Okay, somebody said, isn't there 2 zeros? Well, there are 2 zeros for this particular problem, but can there only be one? Yeah. Can there only be none? Yes, absolutely. So it's not always 2. So if sometimes it's only 1, that's okay. Now in a problem like this, if it gives you a table and a function, but you only see 1 0, you might need to solve for factoring or quadratic or whatever you need to do in order to get the other one. It may be trying to trick you. Okay? So in this case, how do I write my answers? X equals 1 and x equals 5. Okay, and so you can see there that our answer is C. So that saves you a lot of trouble if you just understand that a 0, and that's what they're trying to do. What this question is really asking you is to determine if you know what a 0 is. Okay, a 0 is an x-intercept. If you know what an x-intercept is, then you says, okay, now do you really know what an x-intercept is? Meaning, do you know that every x-intercept has a y of 0? And if you know that, this problem is extremely easy. If you don't, then you have to plug it into quadratic equation, or you got to factor, which you can do, which we're going to do here in a second. Because several people had a hard time with that on their quiz throughout the day, not just in this class. Okay? But let's go ahead and look at our next problem. Okay. Our next problem is another quadratic, and it says the graph of the quadratic function is shown below. Should have cleared that before. Okay, the graph of the quadratic function is shown below. What is the best estimate of the positive value of x for which this function equals 0? Okay? Somebody tell me how to write that the function equals 0. How would I write that? Function equals 0. I'm sorry, equals 8. Thank you. How would I write that? How would I put that on paper? How would I put that on paper?
What did you say now?
That the function equals 8. How would I write that mathematically?
If a function equals 8.
Yeah, how would I write that mathematically? What does that look like?
F of x equals
Say again. Okay. You said, say yours again first. Y equals 8, which is true, and
F of x equals
f of x equals 8. So I would do this. F of x equals 8, or y equals 8.
Hey, what are the solutions to, like, where is it crossing the?
You'll see it here in a second. That's what we're going to talk about in a second. Okay, so if you know that y equals 8, what's the question asking you then? What is the value of x then when y is 8? Okay, so that means what you need to do is go up to 8 on your y-axis and draw a line through there, or as close to it as possible. Okay, so you draw your line up there, and now how many solutions do I have? Yeah, for 8, I'm going to have 2 solutions. One right there, and one right there. That's why I draw the line, so I see where I cross. Now, I want to know what now? The positive value of 8, right? Sorry, the positive value of x when y is 8. Okay, so what does that mean for me on this particular problem? Yeah, I only have to use the one that's on the right side of the y-axis, because on the left side it's negative. So I can cancel that one out. I don't care about that anymore. So all I have to do in order to get this answer is go from that line I drew and the little circle I created and go down, go down to my x value. And that's roughly what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that's roughly 7. So when my y value is 8, the positive x value is 7. Does everybody understand that? Any questions?
Yes, where is it crossing on the x-axis?
Okay, so he's asking what are the roots, basically. What are the roots and what are the zeros? Well, that's irrelevant to this question, but on here,
So I can do it on my paper.
on here it's roughly, it's between 5 and 6, so about 5.5, and then here it's between -1 and -2. Okay. And yeah, it makes a good point. You need to have the graph and the table in your EOC notebook. You can't study this question without the graph and the table. You cannot study this question without the graph and
Where's
the
it
table.
crossing the middle? 5, -5.
I'm sorry. Oh, you're talking about the y-axis?
Yeah. Is it
The
negative?
y-axis is about -5.5. Okay, any other questions on this one? I want to go back to the last one, and I want to solve that using a different method. Actually, we don't have time for that, so we'll skip that. Hang on, don't move. Okay, now here's the deal.